All right, well, it looks like we've got about 30 participants now, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Jeff Hendrickson. I'm the Web Content Manager in University Marketing and Communications, and I help organize this meeting. Today, we've got Thom Thorpe, who will be giving us a word on the street, and then Terrell Thompson will talk to us about the Zero Errors accessibility campaign that we have this month. And then we'll end the meeting with Peter Giles from the Office of the CISO will talk to us about the solar wind hack and how we can tighten up some of our web development processes. So Thom, I'll turn it over to you and get us started with word on the street.
All right, good morning, everyone. As I do my normal dance to try to figure out how to share my screen. Does everyone see my PowerPoint? Awesome. All right, our next meeting will be June 3rd on Zoom. So more details will come about that as we get closer to the date. So jumping right in, our communities of practice this month. Drupal will meet right after this at 10, and I will be sure to post the links in our chat just as soon as I'm done. I know WordPress is also meeting this morning at 10. Front End Technologies Group, their next meeting will actually be joining the UX community of practice. That will be May 18th at 2 p.m. If you would like more info on the front end group, you'll have the links here. And of course, we'll make this presentation available for everyone after the meeting. But if you are interested in attending that UX and Design Thinking COP, like I said, May 18th at 2 p.m., best practices for form design. So I think that will be a great meeting for those of us who work on web applications and need forms. Please consider joining their mailman list. We have the link down there, but of course you can get more information on their wiki page. And second Thursdays at 10 a.m., we have our web accessibility usability meetup with our good friend Hadi. There is his Zoom link there. Always a great opportunity to engage, learn more, share, and get better at our craft. And then, of course, we round out this morning with our office hours, accessibility office hours at 11 and UMAC office hours. Both Zoom links are there, and of course, we'll get those in the chat. Great opportunities to drop in, ask questions. Just, feel free to join in, and we'll be happy to help you with things. Jobs. We have so many jobs this month. Everything that you could think of. These are great opportunities for folks in your network to join our wonderful university. If you would like to post these, feel free to do so, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever you would like. Have folks go to uw.edu/jobs. And that code that you see on the end there, they can search by job requisition number, and that will take them directly to one of these openings. But as you can see, there is lots of great stuff all around the university at all three campuses and the medical centers. Great opportunities, including a graphic designer at UMAC for your network to join us here at the university. Boy, this list just keeps on going. Lots of great stuff out there. I'll let you all look at that later. So for local meetups, New Tech Seattle, they've got two great meetups this week, or this month rather, How to Ask for Help and the intersection of blockchain and Al. I don't know who Al is, but I'm sure he's a wonderful guy. At least that's how I read it when I first saw it. It is AI though, the intersection of blockchain and AI. Seattle JS Hackers continuing their virtual coffees on Thursdays at 5:30 and their virtual code reviews on third Tuesdays at 5:30. Great opportunity for those of you in the JavaScript space to be able to get code reviews and meet with our peers outside the university. ADAs, we've got Tragic Design, the impact of bad product design and how to fix it on the 13th. And what I think would be a really interesting book, something I'm interested in looking into, is Design for Cognitive Bias on June 10th at 7. So two great opportunities there to get a little bit more knowledge on user experience. Thinkful Seattle has a full lineup this month as well. On the 11th, they're doing an intro to Asana. That is a project management system that I know many of us in UMAC can say is really amazing. Hoping to move to that very soon. Day in the life of a data scientist, May 15th at 10 a.m. I believe the 15th is a Saturday, so that's, I think, why they're doing the 10 a.m. And then an intro to UI UX user research, which I think could be really, really interesting on the 17th at 5. So several great opportunities there as well. I do want to, as always, make my usual plug for the Seattle Drupal and WordPress users groups. All kinds of great ways to engage on those two content management systems, multiple dates, times, locations, all kinds of different meetups. Just a great opportunity to learn more about the products and meet our colleagues outside the university. So local and virtual conferences. I noticed that a lot of conferences are coming back online after a hiatus here in 2020. UX Fest this year is in London, but it is virtual. Mind the Product Conference is in San Francisco and virtual. You will notice a number of these will be hybrid events as well. In July, end of July, High Ed Web has their Accessibility Summit. Design Content will be virtual right after that. WP Campus, hat tip to Terry for the dates and times on this one will be September 21st through 22nd. That will be virtual at the link below. Next Web will be in Amsterdam this year and virtual 30th of September through October 1st. High Ed Web will be virtual on October 4th and 5th. And finally, rounding things out, an Event Apart says they will be in person in San Francisco December 13th through 15th. So if we are able to do that, it might be a great opportunity to go see the city by the bay. I want to take a few minutes here to remind everyone about the 2021 UW IT Customer Experience Survey. Hopefully you all have heard about it. If you haven't, this is a great opportunity to let UW IT know how they can improve their services and support. It is a 10-minute, completely confidential survey. I've taken it. I can vouch for that. It is very easy. You go through, you tell them which products you have some experience with, how you've interacted with their help desk as well. Share a few thoughts, and that's it. Very quick, very easy. If you haven't taken it, the survey closes tomorrow. That's May 7th at midnight. So time is running out. The link is there. I'm also going to post this in the chat, but you can always go to IT Connect. It'll be right there on the homepage. So please, if you haven't taken it, please do take it. It is incredibly valuable. It really helps us. And if you have taken it, my thanks to you. And no matter if you have or haven't taken it, please tell your friends and colleagues. Just a great opportunity to provide feedback to a great group on campus. And then finally, our monthly theme for May is Be Boundless. So that means we are looking for those stories of impact. So if you have a story of impact around the Be Boundless theme or the Be Boundless hashtag, please let us know. A couple of strategic considerations, two have already passed, but important to call out no matter what. First was the decision deadline for fall 2021 admission. We hope to be hearing soon what the fall 2021 class looks like. And then the third was the 5th anniversary launch of the Population Health Initiative. And that is something that we are looking forward to celebrating a little more in person in the fall. Also, great opportunity to remind folks of the wonderful and beautiful artwork that was recently installed in front of the new Hans Rosling building on 15th. If you're looking for something to do on the weekend, it's a great opportunity to go by. There are beautiful pieces outside. Just absolutely gorgeous. So I really highly recommend that. And of course, rounding out the month is Memorial Day, wonderful 3-day weekend. Hopefully you can make it even a 4-day weekend, enjoy a little time off. And so with that, I will pause for a minute for any questions or comments. All right. Well, that is all from Studio 1A. I'm turning it back over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Tom. That was very informative. And as a reminder, I posted the slides on our wiki, and that's uw.edu/webcouncil. And we'll also post some links in the chat for the various other communities of practice that are occurring this morning. Okay, so next up, we'll turn it over to Terrell Thompson of UW IT Accessible Technology Services, and he's going to give us an overview of the Zero Errors campaign that they're partaking in this month. So Terrell, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Tom, and thanks everyone for being here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've got some slides to share, and then I also want to do a little bit of accessibility checking in browsers, just kind of demonstrate some of the tools we're talking about. So I guess sort of a companion theme to Be Boundless in May is Zero Errors in May. This is the theme that we are kind of evangelizing, and I'll explain why in these PowerPoint slides. So I don't like to talk about the law much. I'm not a lawyer, and I think that we generally don't need to. This kind of reminder that we want, as web designers and developers, we want our websites to be accessible to everybody. We're not building things that we want to be exclusive. But it is good to remind ourselves every once in a while we do have legal obligations to do that. Dating all the way back to 1973 with Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act a little bit later in 1990, both of those being civil rights laws that prohibit discrimination against persons with disabilities. So those, of course, 73 and 1990, if for those of you that were around back then, that was before the internet was even a thing. And technology certainly wasn't playing the role that it plays now in higher education. But what has emerged over the years, over recent years, is that under these two laws, we still are expected to ensure that our programs and services are accessible. And since we're now delivering those programs and services via the web and through other information technologies, we need to ensure that those technologies are accessible. Otherwise, our programs and services are not accessible, and that places us in violation of these federal laws. And so there have been hundreds of legal complaints against higher education institutions for inaccessible IT. And through those resolution agreements and settlements that have come from those cases, it has been clearly established that WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, version now 2.1, that's the latest version, level 2A, that is our expected level of accessibility compliance. And then Washington State Policy 188 reinforces that and requires that all state agencies, including higher education institutions, meet WCAG 2.1 level 2A. So I've developed an interest recently in some of those cases because I know they're out there, and we actually, knock on wood, are not one of them, which is awesome, and we want to keep it that way. So that's kudos to all of you who develop websites and design and create web content, that we've managed to avoid this somehow. It's interesting to kind of comb through the data and see, what can we learn from the cases that are out there. So Office for Civil Rights, or OCR, with the Department of Education provides a couple of different means of searching both their active cases and their resolutions. And if you do a recent resolution search and filter that, the slide shows their website where you've got a bunch of different filters. So you can filter on disability discrimination because they also handle other sorts of civil rights discrimination and complaints. But filter for disability discrimination, filter for post-secondary education, and filter for website and online accessibility as the area of concern. And you end up with 247 cases from 2014 to present. So that's cases that have gone through the whole system and have resulted in a resolution agreement where the institution has agreed to certain terms. And through this database, you can then read the letter, read the agreement, and see, what was the issue that was brought to OCR's attention, and what did OCR do about it. So again, 247 resolved complaints. There's a separate search for complaints that have been filed but not resolved, and that it's kind of spotty, but there are 326 additional complaints in higher education for disability discrimination. 195 of those are categorized as accessibility of website / online courses, but there are others that are not categorized that way that are in fact 80 website and online course complaints. So anyway, and just kind of randomly going through and comparing this list with the resolved complaints list, they do seem to be two separate lists. So if you do some math, we're looking at hundreds, shorten it that way, that there are hundreds of complaints against higher education institutions for inaccessible websites and online courses. And again, knock on wood, we're not one of them. So that's awesome. I did go through a sample of 20 of those OCR resolution letters, and just to look to see, what can we learn from those? They weren't randomly sampled. These were all kind of just letters of interest. Some were, mostly I focused on universities, so sort of our peers, major research universities, but then also there are a few schools in Washington that I was particularly curious about. WSU and Western and Gonzaga have all faced complaints. And so, what can we learn from their examples? So some of the interesting things that came from this, and the reason we're doing a zero errors campaign, is the role of accessibility checkers in these complaints. That 100% of the letters, of all 20 really, but particularly those in 2017 and 18, they actually spelled out all the details of, what was included in the original complaint, and what did OCR do to investigate the complaint. And in both cases, they used accessibility checkers. So sometimes the complaint was filed based entirely on an accessibility checker. So somebody would run an accessibility checker on the university's web pages, a few of them, and then they would file a complaint and use the results of the accessibility checker as evidence. And then OCR would use an accessibility checker to verify that there are in fact problems that need to be resolved. And even in the cases later in 2019, 2020, they don't actually go into so much detail naming the checkers and so forth, but it's still clear from the issues that they identified that accessibility checkers are behind a lot of this. They're not really looking at functional accessibility, which is what we talk about a lot within our group. Just looking at, can a person use this website to do the things that it's intended to be used for? And sort of follow that workflow, follow that path. And there are lots of issues that accessibility checkers really don't unearth. But accessibility checkers, as it turns out, are really playing an important role in the legal landscape. So back in 2017-18, when they actually named the accessibility checkers that were involved, there were 3 that were named repeatedly. And these don't add up to 100%. So it's often multiples where the person filing the complaint would use Power Mapper and or Wave and or a checker to review several web pages at the institution. And then OCR would use some of those same tools to follow up and confirm that there are in fact problems. So, so then, Power Mapper and Wave still exist. So it seems important that we use those tools to check our web pages and make sure that we have 0 errors, hence the 0 error campaign. A checker actually is, it's no longer maintained, and they're actually going to pull it down sometime soon. This was a tool that was developed a long time ago out of the University of Toronto. But all 3 of these are checkers that have a free version, and so therefore, pretty widely used for checking accessibility. But there are lots of others as well. So the most frequent web pages cited, kind of my takeaway here was that you can't really count on this because there are so many. There's a footnote at the bottom here, a wide variety of additional pages, very random. They often would select 10 pages from just kind of strange, both administrative and academic units, and it seemed pretty random in the ones they were selecting. So I think we can assume that everybody's at risk, but the web pages that are common, certainly the home page, they all start with the home page. So no pressure there, Tom, but the home page is a target, and that would be expected. But also financial aid, disability services, and anything disability related, which makes sense because the target audience has, is using assistive technologies and is going to be, particularly in need of accessible resources. Also, admissions and libraries were high. A couple of interesting ones that came up were Facebook, and they actually had the URL to facebook.com. For 6 institutions that was specifically named as a problem. Western and Gonzaga were among those where Facebook was cited as a problem. And I actually talked with the folks at Western who are involved in this, and to try and get a better sense of the implications of that. Are they saying, because Facebook has accessibility problems, we need to stay away from that and not have a Facebook presence? Or, what does this mean exactly? And it really was focused more on, at least in Western's case, and I think there's actually language in Gonzaga's letter too that reinforces this, that social media platforms do have some accessibility baked in, where you can add captions to videos and you can add alt text to images. So the things that we have control over, there is an expectation that on our official, social media presence, we actually pay attention to those things. And, our images do have alt text, and our videos are captioned. So that really is the focus of, why Facebook is being included in some of these complaints. Also of some concern is athletics, that popped up at 2 institutions. Both were sort of athletic powerhouses, if you will. And so, so I think, the better a team we have, we all want the Huskies to do well, but the more visibility we have in that space, then we got to make sure that our athletics website is accessible too. So if anybody here has some influence over that, that is a space where we have historically needed more attention. So what are the most frequent accessibility issues? These aren't necessarily the issues that I would say are the most critical. We spend a lot of time as we're providing web accessibility support and consultation, and in the the monthly meetups on the second Thursday of each month, we often are looking at sort of complex user interfaces where you've got carousels and accordions and navigation menus and things that are more challenging to make accessible, and kind of required an advanced code base. But that's not what they're looking at. Those are more difficult to measure accessibility, and it is clear that they're using accessibility checkers in the results that we see. So, but also important that we pay attention to these issues because they are the issues that are showing up. Color contrast, super easy to measure, and the highest probability that that's going to show up in a complaint. 75% of the letters mentioned that there are problems with color contrast. Every checker checks for that. Keyboard accessibility, that kept coming up. including visible focus. They often mention visible focus indicators that as you tab through a website, you can't tell where you are. Particularly, and some browsers do a better job of that than others, like Chrome and WebKit-based browsers, Chrome, Safari, Edge now, have pretty good built-in visible focus, but other browsers do not. Firefox does not, and so they're up to, and there's an expectation that web designers will include in their CSS a visible focus indicator, so people who are using keyboard only, not able to use the mouse, can always tell visibly where they are. Also, alt text, very easy to measure. That shows up, in a majority of the letters. Captions on videos was another big issue. Links was a bit of a mystery. In some cases, it wasn't clear at all what they were talking about, but in later letters, they expanded on what they meant by inaccessible links. And so I've got another slide that talks a little bit more about that. The navigation menu. I've actually presented on navigation menus in various venues at Hyatt Web and at the front end developers group on campus. And so there actually are a lot of problems with navigation menus. Ours in the Boundless theme is pretty good. It's got a bug or two right now, but it is one of the better navigation menus out there. But this could be a lot worse. That number could be a lot worse, but it's just something that has come up in a few of the letters. As has the absence of a skip to main content link that, if you provide good heading structure and ARIA landmarks, then screen reader users can actually get around really well without needing a skip to main content link. But that still is a very useful feature for keyboard users with eyesight who aren't using a screen reader, but they can't use the mouse and they're just using the tab key to laboriously work their way through a website. They need to be able to skip, all the stuff that's in the periphery and jump right to the main content, probably more than anybody else does. So there still is a need for that, and that does come up in some of the complaints. So those are some issues to watch for. Regarding inaccessible links, they had in the early days, it's kind of interesting to read through these chronologically, look at some of the older letters and then look at the more recent letters and see how they've revised their language. I think OCR has developed a better understanding of web accessibility over time, but in some of the early letters, they just said empty links. They said links not meaningfully labeled or titled, which was kind of a mystery to me what they're talking about. They said there are links that contain no text links, which again had me sort of scratching my head. Then this one more recently, some links were not meaningfully labeled, impacting people who use the screen reader because to be more efficient, they will sometimes only look at links contained on a website. But when a link is labeled read more, that does not provide enough information to know what the link is for. So read more links. We've talked about that, where you just got kind of a redundant link that appears various places multiple times on a page. That is probably just one of the issues that they're talking about here. So my interpretation of what they mean by inaccessible links could be redundant links like read more, or links, in other words, that don't stand alone. They're not meaningful independently of context. So if a screen reader user, for example, is just tabbing through the links on a page, or if they pull up a list of the links on the page, which that's a function of screen readers, they can then alphabetize the list or navigate it in various ways. Then read more makes no sense at all in that context. So links need to stand alone. They need to have meaningful text. But probably there are also problems with links that contain images if those images have no alt text, or links that contain icon fonts or SVG graphics where there is no label. And in those kind of cases, you would use the ARIA label attribute in conjunction with ARIA hidden to hide the actual graphic, so screen readers don't attempt to read that, but instead they just read the label. So there are techniques to ensure that icons or images that are clickable, do have something meaningful for screen reader users. I know that is a common problem, and so that probably is what, the basis for some of these complaints that OCR has not been able to verbalize very well. Also, there's the issue, and OCR does actually spell this out in at least one case, where links and buttons is a common misconception. They're used interchangeably, and they really should not be. That links take the user to a new page or a section within the page, and buttons perform an action. And so you need to use those appropriately. Otherwise, it creates a false expectation. If a user's on a button, or if they're on a link and it actually behaves like a button, then they expect when they're on a link that they're going to go to a new web page, and instead something else happens, and they, depending on how it's coded, they probably have no idea what just happened. And so that can be, you can have a link that behaves like a button, but it needs role equals button on it. That's an ARIA attribute that communicates to screen reader users that this is a button. They don't even recognize it as a link because it doesn't behave like a link. So anyway, so with all that, the bottom line is accessibility checkers are playing a key role in these hundreds of accessibility complaints that are filed against universities. And therefore, we should use accessibility checkers, and they check all these things, all those top errors that we can find. We can get our errors down to 0, and then somebody wants to take us on, they run an accessibility check on our web pages, and they got nothing. And OCR, if they were to do an investigation of us, they got nothing, because the checkers show 0 errors in every tool that we use, or some of them presented as 100% accessible. So this is what we should strive for, and it really is not that hard. It's just a matter of taking advantage of the tools that we have available to get, find out what the errors are that are automatically detectable, and to fix those errors. So this campaign we're launching, we're focusing some time in May. Because May 20th is Global Accessibility Awareness Day. So that always is a big day. Globally, it's a big day for focusing on IT accessibility efforts. And we have a tradition here at the UW of doing a lot of stuff in that space on that day. And so we're going to dedicate time that entire day to sort of helping with this effort to get down to 0 errors. But we also have activities all month long, starting with this talk, but also with Accessible Technology office hours, which are today from 11 to noon. And Tom shared the URL earlier, and I've got the URL coming up in a later slide. There also are several other activities that we're doing throughout the month, and those you can find on our events page at uw.edu/accessibility/events. So a few of the accessibility checkers, I just want to mention a few, and then with a few minutes left, I want to actually show some of these so you can see kind of the differences between them all. I often get questions, where somebody will run maybe multiple checkers, and they say, well, I got different results of these checkers. Which one am I supposed to believe? And the answer is all of them, that they all do measure things a little bit differently, and that they all find things differently. And that might make you a little bit cynical, sort of thinking, well, can you even trust these tools? They're all coming up with different results. And I look at it as different perspectives of the same thing. So you've got, Power Mapper looking at your accessibility from one angle, and Wave from another angle, and Lighthouse from another angle, and Axe from a fourth angle, and that helps to form a full picture. So they actually all have something useful to contribute, and you should use as many as you can get your hands on, and then try to fix them all. And you learn from that. There's some overlap where you get the same issues showing up in different tools, but there's also some issues that'll only show up in one tool because it checks things a little bit differently than the other tools. So Power Mapper actually had not really been on my radar. I haven't used it extensively, but that is, the most commonly used, the most commonly referenced in the OCR complaints. Wave is another one that is popular from WebAIM. And then there are a couple that work as plugins within Chrome DevTools. Lighthouse is actually built into Chrome DevTools, and Axe from DQ. You can download the Axe extension. They have kind of revamped their business model, and so they've got commercial licenses available with higher end features and APIs that you can build into your development stack. But they do have a free checker, so you kind of have to dodge the ads to upgrade. But the free checker is pretty useful. Also, we have a Site Improve license. It's a limited license, so it doesn't cover the entire university. And we always are kind of pushing the limit of the number of pages that we're allowed to crawl. But Thom manages that, and so just ask him if you don't already have access to license to the Site Improve license, then maybe you can get your site included. We kind of every once in a while we rotate people off and rotate new people in. And also there's a Site Improve browser extension that you can use to check individual web pages, which can be really helpful. Also, a tool that we all have available already is our keyboard. And one of those issues that was high on the list, I think it was the second most popular list in the OCR issues list, was keyboard accessibility. So take the no mouse challenge and just try your website without a mouse, preferably in Firefox, because as I mentioned, it has a lesser built-in visible focus indicator. And so that'll really give you a sense of, can I do everything? Can I access everything? Can I tell where I am if I'm using just the keyboard, not using the mouse? So really simple thing to check. And there are many more tools as well on the tools and resources page. All of the URLs that I'm going to share for our stuff are at uw.edu/accessibility, and then you just add something to the end of that. So /tools will get you to our tools page, which has an annotated list of the tools that we use and prefer. So beyond just the web, we also have checkers for checking online courses in Canvas. That's Ally. You can get a full course report on your accessibility of the materials in your course. You can check Microsoft Office documents, Word docs, PowerPoint docs using Office's built-in accessibility checker. You can check PDFs through Adobe Acrobat. And we've got our homegrown YouTube caption auditor, or YTCA. That's an open source checker that uses the YouTube data API to just check whether videos are captioned, but it also provides a lot of detail about traffic and so forth. And you can sort your videos. If you're a YouTube channel owner, you can sort your videos by date or by traffic, and see which ones that would be the highest priority, like the highest traffic videos that are the most recent. Are they captioned or not? And you can use that to caption your videos. And so again, video captioning was high on the OCR list, and so we want to see, this is a snapshot here of the report that a channel owner can get through ITCA. Shows the number of videos, in this case 120 from one of the YouTube channels, and how many of those are captioned. 120, 100%. That's what we want to see in the zero errors campaign. Not only get all of your errors down to zero, but caption all your videos. There have been a few channels at the UW who have succeeded in doing that. So, and we actually have funding to help support that effort. So yeah, if you're responsible for a YouTube channel or somebody that is, be sure and follow up on that, and get in touch with us if you want to explore what sort of funding is available to help. So again, we have a number of activities this month. I launched the campaign with a blog post just a couple days ago, so check that out. It has kind of reiterates what I've been talking about today, but provides some additional information. And then Accessible Tech Office Hours. Thom shared this URL earlier, but it's here once again. If you want to come today at 11 o'clock, we'll be standing by and happy to answer any questions that folks have about using checkers and getting their errors down to zero. Also, Global Accessibility Awareness Day, I mentioned. We're dividing that into 2 segments. We've got trainings on using checkers from 9 a.m. to noon. So we're going to go into various checkers and really plunge in depth and look at how to use those. And then it's work time, and we're just going to be standing by all afternoon from noon to 5, ready to help people who are doing this and and need some help. They run into some issues they don't understand or they can't figure out how to fix. Then we're going to be available to help with that. So it's kind of a half-day hackathon or full day if you count the training time. But we're all doing this from the comfort of our home, but with each other's support. So, and plus many other activities. We have our usual set of activities like the monthly meetup on the 2nd Thursday, as well as the webinar series. We're going to be doing document accessibility, talking about document accessibility checkers within that context. All of that is profiled at uw.edu/accessibility/events. So I don't have a whole lot of time. I want to make sure and save time for the security segment. But I do want to just look quickly over here in Chrome. I've got our Accessible University website up. This is, for those that aren't familiar, this is a website that we created with grant funding that demonstrates all the things you can do wrong, or at least a lot of them. There are 18 known accessibility issues on this page. And this is the before page, but then we also have an after page that fixes all those errors. And then there's a middle page that talks about what the problems are and what the solutions are. And so this actually makes for a good demo for checking out accessibility checkers. So I'll just, since I don't have a lot of time, we'll go pretty quickly through these. But Wave opens up in a sidebar and then adds a bunch of graphics to your website, identifying errors as well as contrast errors, alerts, features, structural elements, and ARIA. This is the inaccessible version, so it has no ARIA. And then you can kind of explore the icons in order to figure out, what the issues are. So I usually like to focus on the errors, and it gets a little cluttered and a little noisy. So you can uncheck things you don't want to see. So get rid of all the alerts, get rid of all the features, all the structural elements, just focus on the errors, turn off contrast errors for now. And then, that helps a little bit, but then we can also, hone in on just specific things like missing alt text. Okay, so here's one of those. We click on that, it gives us some additional information. So super helpful. If we look at the contrast errors, we see that these menu items are where the contrast errors reside. I need to go to the contrast tab to see details on that. But one of the things that Wave has a unique feature set on, which is really cool, is it shows you, what the colors look like, and it shows that they pass, or that whether they pass or fail at the various levels in WCAG. Again, we're trying to meet WCAG 2A, and so we can then play around with color choices by lightening and darkening. If we could either darken the text or lighten the background. If we choose to darken the text, we can just crank it down a little bit until we start to see passes already. If it's larger text, then it would pass already at 2A, but we want to pass with normal size text, and we do that right there. So then you can see this color choice, is really a better choice. It still is in the same theme, but it's a darker color, a little bit easier to read. And here is the hex value. So all we got to do is copy that, paste it into our CSS, and we fix the problem. So super super handy, super easy. Pardon the froggy voice here. Let's also look with one of the with Lighthouse, which is built into Chrome DevTools. And so we go to the Lighthouse tab, we generate a report, it then audits the page, and we got a score of 52, which I would actually hope for a worse score than that, given that, you know, this is intentionally inaccessible. but it gives, you know, breaks down the issues, and then we just kind of walk through the report to find out the details. And it actually shows us where the details reside. This is one for the whole page, but like our contrast issues, if we look at those, it actually shows us a picture of where this problem you know, resides, and we can get, you know, additional information about all of these issues. For ACTS, I actually want to go over to the UW homepage, and I don't know, Tom, I know you're here. I don't know whether Lauren popped in, but Lauren has actually pledged to fix all of the boundless theme issues. So people are trying to attain 0 errors, and they're getting errors in the theme. And you're using, if you're using the standard boundless theme, those issues will be fixed. And there actually aren't many, but if we run ACTS, we scan the entire page, we see there are 39 issues, which sounds like a lot, but they're all listed here. There are actually only 4 categories of issues, and most of those problems are color contrast problems. So there's one that is an ARIA hidden element that must not contain focusable elements. So, and then over on the right, if we click on that issue, we can scroll down and get more detail. It shows the location of this problem is an ID called UW search area. We look at the source of that. There is an ARIA hidden equals true on this element. And it tells us what we can do to solve the problem. The problem is, you know, this is the hidden search area that appears when you click here. But this input field is not, apparently it's not hidden. I would need to investigate this a little further, or Lauren can investigate this further. But this whole div is hidden, but there's that focusable element inside it. And so that's what I think it is not an actual issue. It's kind of a false positive, but it is one that that is programmatically determinable and shows up in a lot of different accessibility checkers, not just ACTS. The other ID attribute value must be unique. The last one, links with the same name have a similar purpose. That actually is an interesting one, that where the problem is the element source for the University of Washington logo, and there is a redundant University of Washington link that points to a different URL in the footer, and so we can actually inspect the code to see, you know, what's going on with that exactly, and it pops up over here. Here's the link. That is pointing to uw.edu. And if we then go down to the second occurrence and we inspect that node, we see it also is, the link text is University of Washington, but the URL is different. It's washington.edu, not uw.edu. So obviously we know that's going to go to the same place, but to satisfy the checker, we could edit this attribute, change it to uw.edu, then go back to ACTS and refresh, and that issue is no longer there. So we obviously, we haven't fixed this live, we've just fixed it here, you know, in the browser, but that confirms that has fixed the issue. So now we can go, you know, fix it in the template itself. For color contrast, since there are 35 color contrast issues, one thing that comes up a lot with color contrast, and if we actually just look at this page, I don't really see any problems. It looks, you know, plenty good. You get lots of dark purple, you know, and white on a dark purple, and that, you know, that works pretty well. Quick links, actually, you know, that black on brown is questionable, but that actually is not the problem. Problem is, most of the problems anyway are over here. That's not all 35 of them. Well, there are some other problems too, but and that too looks good. But what happens a lot is you've got background images that are creating this illusion of good contrast. For people that can see that, that's great. But if something goes awry with the CSS, and we can do this with the web developer toolbar, it's not a checker per se, but a really handy tool to have for checking accessibility. If we go to hide background images, then this is what the homepage looks like with no background images. We've got over here in the quick links, we've got white on white. And there are also problems, in the hero image and elsewhere throughout the site. All the contrast issues are issues with backgrounds that don't have a specific background color defined in the style sheet. So that too is a pretty simple fix. Most users are going to see the background image instead, but for whatever reason the image doesn't load, you need to have an actual color background image presented as well. So that's just kind of a quick tour through some of the checkers. Again, we can go into much more detail. We will go into much more detail on Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and we are also available to help today at 11 or anytime really. If issues come up that you want help with, then let us know, and let us know how this goes. If you work on this and you actually reduce your errors, even if you don't get down to 0, tell us that story. We'd love to hear how this works out for folks.
Well, thank you, Terrell. Any questions on accessibility? I think we've got a few minutes. We're going to save Peter's presentation for next Web Council, but this is really good stuff on accessibility. Any follow-up questions for Terrell?
Jeff, we have one in the chat from Mary asking, is there a time frame for the fixes to the Boundless template? I apologize, Lauren was not able to make it to Web Council today, and I don't want to speak on her behalf, but I know that she and her team are working on a project plan to address a lot of those issues. And I just don't have that for you right now.
She also said to me that she accepts pull requests. So, if anybody, wants to take these on, and I think that was probably directed more to me than to anybody else. But if anybody has the time and, is a GitHub user, then feel free to fix whatever you feel needs fixing and then submit that as a pull request.
Oh yeah, that is directed to everyone. We love a pull request. We're not the largest dev team on campus, so we're happy to get all the help we can get. So if folks see something and you have a few minutes and you'd like to help out, we would certainly be very appreciative of that. And always happy to credit folks and thank folks for their hard work.
Okay, any additional questions for Terrell? Apologies to Peter. We'll have him at the next Web Council meeting to present the security short, but we're a little bit short on time, so I talked with him and we decided just to save it for the next meeting.
Yeah, sorry, Peter. I get excited.
No worries whatsoever. That was good stuff.
Yeah, it's great stuff, and it gives great to see those tools in action, and hopefully we can make some progress on those issues this month, and it's great to have the campaign as a catalyst. So any other questions? I know we've got Tom has posted the links to the various user groups that are meeting this morning, and then the office hours for accessible technology and UMAC. Okay, we've got a question in the chat. Terrell, how do you handle false positives? I.e. the tool flags something, but you take a look and it isn't really relevant for whatever reason.
Some tools may allow you to dismiss that. It kind of depends on the tool. So you need to be careful with that too, and make sure that you know for sure that it's a false positive. But like the input field in the ARIA hidden element probably is not really an issue. But I also think it's probably fixable. That probably that outer element just needs a display none on it, so that it officially is hidden temporarily, not just for screen reader users, but for everybody. And so that might be, the way to, it's kind of like tricking the checker, which is not, not what we're after either. But sometimes that can help. You get a false positive. Sometimes there are some hacks that might make that error go away, or maybe the checker provides some means of making that error go away. Otherwise, don't take it too seriously. We do want to get down to 0 errors, but more than that, we just want to get down to having a fully accessible site and reducing our risk, for somebody else to be able to check our sites and say, oh, they've got all these accessibility errors. If we can get it down to just 1 or 2 that are false positives, and we can make that case, then that feels like our risk is in a much better place.
Yeah, and I know like a tool like Cite Improve does have the ability, if you have, oftentimes there'll be certain spelling issues that maybe the tool isn't aware of, certain terms that get picked up, that you can have it ignore. But
yep.
As you showed in the demonstration, sometimes it's just the URL is slightly different from uw.edu versus washington.edu. And that's something that's pretty simple to kind of streamline those to be the same. So, okay, well, thank you, Terrell and Tom, for presenting, and apologies to Peter. We'll have you at the very next Web Council, and looking forward to your presentation. And yeah, check out the communities of practice, and we will either see you later in the morning or at a meeting later in the month. So, okay, bye everyone.